Hello, my name is Nina. Welcome to my channel and welcome to a new spoiler reading vlog. In this video, I am reading Onyx Storm, the third book in the Imperium series from Fourth Wing. I've already made reading vlogs for both the first and the second book of this series, and I did not really like the second book. So at the end of the last video, I was like, I don't know how interesting this is going to be because I don't know if I'm going to like the third book. But then I got a few comments from people saying that they still really would like to see the third one. So here I am. I went into this book with really low expectations. So please be aware that this might not be the most positive video. Don't worry if you did really like this book. I hopefully am not here to shame anyone. I am just here to share my own opinion, obviously. And I do think that there were a lot of really interesting and really crazy things that happened in this book. So I still think it might be interesting to watch. If you did really like this book, I would love to hear your opinion about all of the things that I talk about in this video. I am really not saying that my opinion is the right one. I would love to hear other people's thoughts. So please do share with me in the comments. Now, like I said, this is a full spoiler video. So that means that I am talking about everything in this video. There is nothing in this book that I'm not discussing openly in this video. So if you have not read this book and you want to read this book, do not watch this video. If you have not seen my videos about Fourth Wing and Iron Flame, I would highly recommend watching those first. But for now, let's start my Onyx Storm reading vlog. I am about 2 hours into Onyx Storm, and as expected, I am not having fun. I try to not be too cynical about this book, but we've jumped straight back into the action without really any talk of why. Xaden is Venom. We're not really learning anything about it except that he's like really scared and he doesn't want to touch Violet. And there was one point where they were having sex and he accidentally channeled again, which I don't know, he lost control and then he accidentally did it or something. I just kind of hate the Xaden is Venom storyline. So every time it's about that, I'm like, ugh. Okay. I just do not really care about this, which is annoying because I did really like them together. So I don't really know why I don't care. I should kind of care about him, I think. I'm just like, they're gonna find a way to fix it. So I'm not worried. And then there's the storyline of Andarna's dragon breed, and they want to find more dragons like her because she apparently is a separate breed from the other dragons that they knew, which we figured out in the last book. And I don't know, I think my main gripe with this book, and it has been my main gripe with the past two as well, is that every single thing is so dramatic that nothing is dramatic anymore. Every single thing is described as this like, oh my god, we're losing our lives, we're gonna fight, be in this crazy battle, we're risking everything, blah 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 blah. But every single thing. So at some point I'm like, well, nothing has really happened so far, so I guess it's not that deep. And that's how I feel about this. Like, they're about to leave for this whole thing and everyone is like, oh my god, it's so dangerous, blah blah blah, but like, it's gonna be fine. But again, it took me a long time to like the first and semi-like the second book. So I'm gonna hope that it at least gets more interesting as we go. I am currently at chapter 15 of Onyx Storm. And one thing I've noticed, which is on me, like this is my fault, but because I am not really interested in anything that's discussed, I'm kind of bored with everything, makes me not pay attention as much. And I'm like kind of glancing over the words and I'm kind of getting distracted and like thinking while I'm reading, which has the unfortunate side effect that I am missing things and I'm confused about things that I think are probably explained. Like, I'm not sure, but I'm assuming they're explained. I just don't really understand. And I don't care enough about them to like look it up. So far, some things have happened, but none of them have really interested me. One big thing that is happening is that they keep having these negotiations.
And I just don't really know why. I think it's because of the search for Andarna's dragon breed, but I am not 100% sure. And honestly, it doesn't really matter to me because like they're having all these conversations, there's different sides to this discussion. And in the end, they're going to explain to me what the result will be. So I don't really care about the road to that result right now. And this whole book is just making me a little bit cynical because in any other book, I would be interested. Like, that is part of why I love reading. And the fact that I'm not interested in those details right now really says a lot about how I feel about this book. One kind of funny thing that is happening is that Xaden is now a teacher at the War College, which I think is a funny detail. That means that they cannot be together like romantically. They haven't been together really sexually, at least since Xaden became Venom and he's like afraid of losing control. But now they're like not really allowed to be seen together, and the only conversations they're really having is with their minds, which I think is a fun addition to the story. But besides that, I'm just kind of waiting. I'm currently at 37% of the book. I have this whole fun setup with my e-reader and also this clicker that I have, which has made the reading experience a lot better. However, I haven't updated you at all on any reading progress just because I have been bored out of my mind. Nothing has been happening, and everything that has been happening was either so boring or so extremely violent and like high pressure, but without actually making any impact. So it has not really been an enjoyable book so far to read, but I have just reached the first part where I'm actually interested in what is happening because Violet and Xaden and their like squad arrived at Deverelli, which is a different part of the map, and there is no magic here. Now, I don't know why there's no magic here. It either has not been explained or the explanation was not clear enough to me that I actually remembered it. I have no clue. I know that once they crossed the border, their magic went away, and also most of the like mental bonds that the people have with their dragons. But Violet and Tern and Andarna are still able to communicate. So that's fun. But why this is so interesting to me so far is because there's like two main things that are happening in this book so far. One, we're looking for Andarna's kind to help raise the wards because they are supposed to crumble or like stop working in a few months. And two, we are looking for a way to fix Xaden. And in this part of the map where there's no magic, Xaden is not able to channel, so his like venom problem doesn't exist here. And he's so happy and he's like making jokes, he's flirting with Violet again. It's in a very fun way. It reminds me a lot of how he was in the first book, and I actually really liked him in the first book. So when I'm reading this, I'm like, oh, when he's not complaining about being Venom, he's actually kind of fun. Now we are here for the search for Andarna's kind. I have to say, the way this search is going is really confusing to me because they're meeting with all of these people and they're having like, they're trading things. I don't really understand what's going on. And usually I'm like, that's on me. You know, I'm either not paying attention enough, or I just am a little bit too dumb, or I just don't have enough experience with fantasy or whatever. But in this case, I do feel like this is the writing. I feel like the way this book is written is super vague. That's also how the first two books were written. And I feel like actually explaining to us why what they're doing is leading to finding Andarna's kind is not too much to ask for. Like, that is what I'm confused about. I understand what is happening in terms of like what they're physically doing. I understand where they are and who they're with. I just don't understand why that is helping with finding Andarna's kind. At the same time, they have Violet's dad's book or like his notes that should lead to a fix for Xaden being Venom, which I don't know. I hope it happens because, like I said, I kind of like him when he's not Venom, but I also feel like it's just one of those things where you know is going to get fixed. So I don't really care about like they're being so dramatic about it. They're like, oh my god, he is like in so much danger. Oh my god, everything is going wrong. And I'm like, well, I don't know, man. Seems like you're gonna fix it easily, because that's like every time they're explaining something as being like very high stakes, it gets such easy fixes. For example, at the beginning of this book, they had to do something. I am vague about the details because I read this a long time ago. Like, I've been reading this book on and off for a while, but there was something they had to do to make sure that the Griffin riders were able to use their magic again. And it was described as this like super high stakes, super dangerous, super scary thing. And then it was done and fixed, and like the solution was there within like 5 pages, which is just not really high stakes then if it's that easily fixed. And I feel like this book or this series has done that a lot, which makes me less invested in anything, because I'm like, well, it's gonna be able to be fixed in such an easy way probably. So I'm still not really excited about this book in any way, but I am enjoying these chapters where we're experiencing Xaden without magic. So that's something. At least I'm enjoying something. We're at 37% and I'm enjoying something. So that's good, I guess. The books he wrote for you? What do you mean? That's so exciting. Oh, I love that. That's actually a pretty good plot twist. I was not expecting that. That's nice. I like this. Maybe I'm getting into this book. I hope so. It's about time. I'm about halfway through this book, and I just read the part where Xaden and Violet are negotiating with Cortland. I'm actually not sure if that's his name. Anyway, everything goes to shit, and Xaden draws power from the earth once again. And I think what annoys me so much about this book is that I am interested in the details about things like this. I want to know what the rules are about when do you turn Venom? How many times do you have to draw power from the earth to actually become Venom? How does drawing power from the earth actually work? What are the rules and the exceptions to those rules in terms of using that magic? Because I was under the impression that when you draw power from the earth gets drained and everyone who is standing on that earth dies. That's what I thought happened with the descriptions of it so far. However, in this scene, he kills specific people using this, because there were like 12 guards and he killed all of them, but all of the people from their side and also Cortland and his crazy like panthers or tigers or whatever the animals were survived. So I don't understand the rules. And I feel like in this book, they just assume that you don't want to know and you only care about like the romance and like a general feeling of unsettlement and war. But I want to know how it works, and that's why I keep feeling like unsatisfied with whatever I'm reading, because we were supposed to be in a land where magic didn't exist. It was not explained to me why magic doesn't exist there, and it's also now not explained to me how Xaden still used magic while they were there. And I just read the scene, so maybe the explanation will come later, but this is just another example of something that has happened that I don't understand enough. Like, I understand what physically happened in the room. The descriptions that are there are not necessarily unclear. It's just not described to me in a way where I know all the details that I want to know. And it just makes me feel so much less invested. Because if I cannot understand how the magic actually works and like what the rules are, then you can keep changing them. Because I'm unaware if you're doing something that is new, or like, I feel like these books, this series in general, keeps inventing things halfway through where they're like, oh, but this was, you know, we could do this all the time. Did I not tell you? Like this, we've been doing this for years. And then I'm like, that's too easy. You know what I mean? I love it when at the beginning of a series, specific rules are explained throughout the book and you learn how the magic system actually works. And then you can learn how people are manipulating it, or how people are changing things, or how people are using that to their advantage or against other people. And because no baseline has been established, I am not interested in anything else. So that's how I feel right now. I feel also like 50% is kind of the point where with both Fourth Wing and Iron Flame, I started to get interested. So I'm curious to see if it will get better from this point on. So I'm going to continue reading, but I am still mostly annoyed. And this is not a small book. Like 50%, I think I've read, let me look that up actually. I only have it in ebook. I've read over 260 pages for me to be halfway. So I've been reading this for a while.
In one of the earlier videos I made about this book, we talked about Zayden's mom. I was convinced that Zayden's mom was gonna come back because I was like, she is alive, so that means she's gonna come back. If she wasn't gonna come back, she would have died. Like, they would have just killed her in the book. And I just got to the part where they're in this foreign country and his mom is there. This is exciting to me. I love the possibility of this. I feel like this happens a lot in these books, but there's a lot of things where I'm like, conceptually, I think this could be really cool. So far, I've not read anything. As soon as I read his mom, I was like, wait, grab my camera, film this clip. But I have been disappointed before by things that I thought had potential and then ended up disappointing. But I hope this is going to be cool. I think this is a cool concept. Oh my god, did Zayden's mom just try to poison everyone? All right, we've moved on from the whole poison Zayden's mom thing. I think she was not actually part of the poisoning and it was just her new husband. But again, one of the things that has been annoying me about this book and about this series is that I've talked about this before in different videos, but we will be in these like really high stake, interesting scenes, and then they just skip to the next part without really closing it off. The same thing happened a few scenes later where they arrived at this new country, part of the world, whatever they're calling it, and they were being tested in this really weird way, and one of the flyers actually died in that process. And then the second that flyer died, the chapter stopped, and then the next chapter was like, 8 hours later, we're chatting, blah, blah, blah. But the flyer died in like the most high stakes part of that scene, and I would have loved to read more of what actually happened there. Anyway, I have reached the part where we've found Endarna's kind. And that has been the big thing that we're working towards. I feel like we know there's a war coming, but we don't know when yet. And for the war, we wanted to find Endarna's kind, and we wanted to find a cure for Zayden being Venin. That was like two of the things that we're actually doing in this book. And I saw a TikTok the other day that compared this part of this book to the part in the last Harry Potter book where they're camping. And that really does feel the same way, where it just kept feeling like we keep moving around, we're meeting new people, we're finding out things about other, countries and cultures and stuff, but there's not actually anything happening in terms of the plot of this book. And now we have finally reached a point where they found Endarna's kind, and we can work from that now. It's not going as well as we're hoping, but that makes it interesting. I feel like that's an interesting thing. And also, I love the dragons in this book. I've said this before as well. Like, the dragons are actually one of the things that interest me the most, and how these dragons work and how they're thinking. And this whole new species of dragon is really interesting because they have all of these different rules and ways they choose to live their lives, and it's very different from the dragons we have met so far. So I think that is a really interesting thing. I love how we get to see Endarna more as like a full-grown dragon instead of just... I feel like Endarna was a little bit overshadowed by Tern. I can't pronounce that name. I don't know how to say it. Tern? For most of this book so far, like, she has definitely been there, but Tern has been a big part in like
Violet's head, and Darna was mostly someone who was a little bit more on the background, and I love that we're getting to see her shine a little bit more and she can be on the foreground, because I think, like I said, the dragons are like one of my favorite parts about this book or this series. So that's what's been happening now. I listened to the audiobook while I was at ceramics class yesterday, and quite a lot of things happened. First of all, Violet showed her second signet because of the dreams. Like, she can accidentally read other people's dreams or like dream the same thing as them. And even though I think that is a really cool and interesting signet, I hate that all of the second signets from all of the rebellion kids are the ones that are like dangerous and illegal and could get you killed. I feel like the fact that both Xaden and Violet have a second signet that is like mind reading adjacent and they could be killed for it is just a bit repetitive and boring. I think this signet would have been much more interesting if Xaden didn't already have one of those signets. And also I think like at least one or two other rebellion kids have a secret second signet that not everyone is allowed to know. But that being said, I do love the fact that this is the second signet. I feel like this is a really interesting thing, and I love that she's not able to control it yet. I feel like that's really interesting, and we can like accidentally find out a lot of things. So again, this is something that has a lot of potential. Then we got into the battle, and like, this is not a surprise. We're reaching the end, like the last 20% of this book, so obviously we're getting into battle mode. Someone gave an interesting warning. I forgot who it was, but at the beginning of the battle, someone was like, this is how you're gonna save us and how we're gonna win this battle. And she was like, ugh, you're so full of shit. And I was like, I think they're trying to tell you that they saw this in like a seeing the future type way. But she ignored it and the battle went on. I dislike battle scenes, as we know, so that's not very interesting. What was interesting is that Andarna's family showed up, or like one of the Irid dragons showed up and saved them. And I stopped right around the part where we're about to have a conversation, like Andarna and that other dragon are about to talk for the first time. I'm curious to see if this is like the solution to the battle, because they were obviously looking for them because they wanted to help the wards and they needed to strengthen them and possibly like make new ones, and they needed Andarna's kind for that. And that is what this Irid that showed up did. Like, they fixed the wards and then the battle stopped. And I don't know if that is going to be like the end of it for this book. I'm expecting another battle scene, but I don't know what the reason would be, because technically they're like safe now. But we'll see. Oh my god, please tell me that we didn't get this really fucking cool dragon that had all of these potentially cool things that we could possibly do with her. And then in the second book, she was asleep the whole time because she was like getting to adolescence, and now she broke the bond. I feel like Andarna really did not get the amount of screen time that she should have had. Like, don't get me wrong, I love Taryn, but why do we know so little about her? She has just been like cranky, and Taryn has constantly been like, oh, don't listen to her, she's just an adolescence, and or she's been asleep, and now the bond is gone. I hate that. I'm reaching the end of this book. Again, there's a lot of things that I'm confused by and that are not really properly explained. But I just reached the part where there's a chapter from Rhiannon's perspective. And I was so confused because in book 1 and book 2, the final chapter was from someone else's perspective. And I got so scared that that was the last chapter, because I was like, this feels like so anticlimactic in terms of an ending, but it's not the ending, because the chapter after that was Violet once again. And I actually think that is really interesting, because we're in the part of the battle where there's like two separate things happening. There's the part of the actual battle with like the whole squad where Rhiannon is, and then Violet is actually somewhere separate. And I'm glad that we're not just reading from her perspective in this, because I think it's really interesting to read Rhiannon's parts. I'm nearing the end of this book, and I just read the part where Quinn dies and you're like in Imogen's head, and I think that was so well done. It actually made me tear up a little bit, because obviously we've never been in Imogen's head before, so we don't really know the scope of how close she feels to people, but being in her head while she loses someone that she cares a lot about is, I think, a really good way to break up all of the battling that's happening, because this was like actually a really well done emotional moment from people that I would not have cared about if we wouldn't have been in Imogen's head. Like, if we would have read this from Violet's perspective, I wouldn't really have cared, but because Imogen described it in such a tragic way, it really got to me. So I think that was really well done. I think I'm gonna finish the book right now. It's like I only have a little bit left, so we'll see how I feel. I just reached what I assume is the last chapter because it is Xaden's chapter. So before I read that, my first thoughts about the final chapter are, first of all, what the fuck? I don't understand. Second of all, thank God Andarna is back. I love Andarna, and I feel like if I read the rest of the series, I hope that Andarna is a much bigger part of it than she has been so far. I am confused about the whole priestess thing. That has been confusing from the start, and I've not really mentioned it in the video because I was like, I quite literally don't understand. I don't know what I don't know, so I don't know what to say about it. But I guess she killed Theophany, so that's good, I guess. But like, what does that mean for the rest of the battle? It feels a bit inconsequential. Like, okay, now what? But I guess Xaden will tell us in the final chapter, because usually the big reveal is in like whatever Xaden is doing. He did channel from the earth probably again. I'm not sure, but that's what Violet assumed. So I don't know. Confused and not very impressed is what my current mood is. All right, I finished the book. Again, I have a lot of things that I'm confused about. Xaden and Violet are married, I think, because Xaden is like running from himself because he turned almost fully Venom and he gave Erasia to Violet. That's like my assumption, that they got married because then she is in charge. But I don't know where that leaves Bodhi, to be honest. But there was some cryptic shit with Imogen, which I didn't really understand. I'm going to marinate in my thoughts a little bit, and I'm gonna watch a few Onyx Storm explained videos to figure out all of the shit that I don't understand, and then I'll be back for like my final thoughts and feelings about this book. All right, let's discuss my final thoughts about this book. First of all, I am really glad that I finished it. I really struggled with this one, and I think my main problem with this book was that it was trying to be so many things, and it wasn't really any of them. I think this book tried to introduce a lot more of the politics into this fantasy world, and even though I understand why they tried to do that and why it would be interesting, the way it was done was just not executed well enough to actually be interesting, because the politics that were explored were not explained properly enough for me to care about them. And also, there were so many people, so many characters, so many lands that we explored in the whole Andarna search that it was just too much to actually care about any of them. And I feel like it's really hard in this book to differentiate what is actually important from what is there as like fluff. And because there is so much of it, that makes it really hard. Because, for example, in the search for Andarna, we went to so many different lands, and actually like one or two of them were actually important, but because we visited so many, I did not really register those two as important until later, and then I had already forgotten the details of them because I didn't realize that they were important. I actually had to Google what the whole dedication meant, because I feel like that was interesting, but just not explained enough. And that is a theme throughout this whole series, throughout this book specifically. But I had to like look up specifically what did that dedication mean and why was it in the book. And even after reading the Google explanations and like the things on Reddit that people have said, I still have a hard time actually understanding what that means, because it adds this element of goddesses and gods and making sacrifices to gods in this series that has not really been there before. So it once again introduces a whole new spectrum of like deeper meanings behind what is happening, but not enough that I actually understand it, which is sad, because I think if those things like both the politics and the gods were introduced from the beginning in like book 1, I think it actually could be something that's really interesting. But now it's kind of added half-heartedly in the 3rd book without really any thoughts, in my opinion. The ending of this book was messy, to say the least. There's so many things that are like brought up but not actually clarified or explained. And based on how the past 3 books have gone, I'm assuming that next book is not going to start where we left off and like actually give us any explanations. It is going to be like half a book of confusing things again, and then hopefully some answers in the second half. And that is just so sad, because like apparently something happened to Violet, and also she got married, and like Rhiannon erased her memories because Violet asked her to, which is crazy and like so interesting, and I would love to actually learn more. But I feel like with the way this book and this series has been written, I feel like it's too much to ask to actually assume that we will get that explanation, because we have not really gotten any explanation so far. Also, the fact that Xaden is probably fully Venom now, and also someone else turned, because he called someone his brother, which apparently in the Venom world means that they are also Venom, is really interesting. But I don't know, this book has a lot of potential. It just did not reach it. There were so many points in this book where I was either super bored because nothing was really happening, or super confused because the things that were happening were not properly explained to me, and I did not care enough about them because I didn't understand why they were happening, or they were like brushed over. There were so many things that are like introduced in a couple of sentences and then dropped again and never mentioned again, and they will probably come back at some point, but by that point that it has been so long that I probably won't remember. So it's like, I feel like this book is like the worst of both worlds, because sometimes you get a fantasy book that is like so overly explained and so like clear and cliche that it's not interesting anymore, and then sometimes you get a fantasy book that is like so high fantasy that it is like there's so many things happening and you have to really almost like have a notebook with you to understand what is happening. And this book is both and neither, because I feel like if you read one of those like high fantasy books, the process of figuring everything out has a purpose, and eventually you can figure everything out and it has like a meaning. You understand why it was so vague at the beginning, and that is just not the case in this book. And it is written as this like really easy breezy romantasy book, but then they were like, oh, we have to make it a little bit more interesting and add all of these like politics and goddesses and things, but we don't want to make it too complicated, so we're not going to explain it. And that just, I also feel like every video, like every explanation video I've seen about this book, everyone is like, yeah, no, this is like a really confusing book. And then I'm like, but why do we all love this series then? I don't understand, because even the romance that I loved in the first book is not really here anymore. I think we've had like 2 scenes where Violet and Xaden were actually like into each other, because the rest of the time Xaden is struggling with his venom things and Violet is not dealing with her emotions and not talking to anyone and just doing her own thing. So even all of the like relationships and friendships were not really in this book anymore. And that's just so tragic. I feel like Violet is not really a friend anymore, or a sister, or a girlfriend, but just a like war machine. And those were the things so far in this series that really actually interested me. Also, I did really love all of the parts where Endarna was like learning more about her family, but I would have loved to read more about that. I would have loved it if Endarna was taught things about who she is and about her family while we were with her, while we were able to like read her thoughts and she was talking to Violet, and we would actually like experience that with her, because now she just left and then she came back and she had learned all of these things, and it was like, why? I wanted to experience that with her. All in all, I really did not enjoy this book. I think I'm gonna give it 2 stars, which is so low for me. I hope this video was still a little bit entertaining to watch. I did say at the end of my last video that I didn't know if I wanted to make this video because I didn't know if you would like to see a video about a book that I didn't like. But then I did get a few comments from people that told me that they wanted to see it. So I guess here we are. I will probably make another video when the 4th book comes out. I don't know when that is. Wait, let me look that up. Okay, apparently there's no release date yet, so I guess that's somewhere in the future. By then, I think I will have forgotten this whole journey, so hopefully I can go into it with fresh optimism and hopefully actually like that book. But if you did like this book, please let me know what you liked about it. Maybe, like, I always think, like, maybe this is me. Maybe I am just not paying enough attention. Maybe I missed things that were actually really important. But also, this is my opinion. Like, this whole video is literally my opinion, so it doesn't really matter. I really hope that other people did enjoy this book, because I never want people to read things that they don't like. But yeah, this is my opinion about this book so far. Please let me know what your opinions are. I would love to read them. And thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, you can subscribe down below if you want to, and I will hopefully see you again next week. Bye!